Hey guys, welcome back to Take Over AI. My name is Terry Bartley and I'm your host. So I want to make this episode about sort of like what is AI even these days? Like what is, just to sort of like provide some context, tools like ChatGPT, tools like Gemini, tools like Perplexity, these are specifically called large language models. So like if you're sort of like new to this whole world, that's sort of like the chat. Like whenever you do like a chat with an AI, that's a large language model. So I started thinking about like whenever I use it and sort of like the friction points that I start running into, because what I've noticed a lot as a creative who tries to use AI, again, not to like think for me, but just to kind of like help me through my creative process. What I've noticed a lot of times is that it's not really designed for that, because, you know, like a lot of times, like, whenever you're a creative person and you have like 100 projects going on and you bounce around, what I would tend to do a lot whenever I'd use something like ChatGPT is I would have like multiple chats, and then I would just kind of like pop into different chats as needed, because like the logical like idea there was like, well, if I chatted about this thing in the past, then that means that there is some context. So like I can go back and talk about this thing and it will understand what I'm talking about. Recently, I was talking to it about a streaming game, like a role-playing game, a streaming thing that I was developing, and I was pitching like some guest hosts, and then I pitched one of the hosts, then started talking about like how that person would be a good fit for like a fully separate game that I talked to it about like months ago, and not the one that we were like currently talking about, and it was just sort of mind-blowing. And then recently I was trying to like pull quotes from my book, from my new book, because like this feels like a good use case for AI, right? Like I had like put a bunch of my book in just to kind of get feedback here and there. And so like a lot of my like written work was in an AI chat, right? So I went in there and I was like, hey, could you pull out some good quotes that might be good for like TikTok or social media later? Because like that's a way to promote the book, right? Is to like get compelling quotes, pull them. And theoretically, one would think that would be a good use of AI, because it's like a thing that would be like tedious for a human to do, right? Like it's a thing that it could theoretically comb through what I put and like give me some stuff. And it was like, oh yeah, I could for sure do that. You just have to paste in a chapter so that I'm not making up things. And I was like, what are you talking about? There's so much of it here. And it was like, oh, well, I only have the most few recent chats. Can't really see, messages from forever ago. I just kind of like lose track of it. And it's like, what? and it just got me thinking about like, what do they make this for? Like, who are they making this for? And I started chatting with it a little bit just to kind of like try to understand, because a lot of times what I'll do, because as I mentioned in this series, like I am not like an expert with AI. I use AI mainly as a teacher so that I can learn how to use it, so that I can then teach my students how to use it in a way that's not like stifling their thinking. And through doing that, I often will run into things, and then I start saying things to it like, hey, would it be more effective if I did this? Or is this maybe the most effective way to use it? Because like, I don't know how to use AI, and there's not like an instruction manual, strictly speaking, but theoretically, the program itself could function as an instructional manual, right? So I was like, what should I be doing? Should I be making new chats every time? Should I be like saving these old chats? Is that good? Is that bad? Like, what is it exactly? And what it sort of was saying was that essentially most people don't use AI the way that I do, which makes sense, because like I said, like I'm sort of like in this middle lane that's occupied by not a whole lot of people. And I'm trying to figure out like how to navigate a world that we're living in where this just exists and we have to learn how to live with it. And so it makes sense that me trying to use AI in a way that doesn't like do my thinking for me probably isn't the way a lot of people do it. They probably like outsourcing their thinking to something like ChatGPT, which is upsetting to me. The reason I bring this up is what it ultimately seems like, because, the way that tech is generally developed is whoever the largest user base is, whoever the most common user is, the most common use case, they're going to be sort of like be developing for that. Like they're not necessarily looking to develop like how everyone uses it, because like that'd be impossible, right? So trying to figure out like what is being done most often. And as a teacher, I can tell you, I feel like having AI write essays for kids is a far more common use case than helping it brainstorm stories, but only as like an observer and not actually contributing any meaningful ideas, that is not going to be as common of a use case. Or even like the things I do that are more of like ADHD accommodations, like helping me with scheduling and that kind of stuff. Like that is a less common use case than what it is actually being used for. And I think they did use the term that a lot of people use it like a magic 8-ball, where they'll like ask it a question and then just kind of see what pops out. And then they'll just start a new chat the next time, because like they don't actually think about the chats as like things that are like living, files that they can kind of mess around in. And that just seems so wild to me. I mean, like it makes sense that that's what people are doing, but it made me start thinking about the fact that like if tech is developed in this way, right? If the engineers that develop things like ChatGPT are developing it for the largest user base, for the most common use case, they're going to be developing it for that magic 8-ball style of search, right? They're going to be using it as like a Google search replacement, or as like, hey, respond to this prompt that my English teacher gave me and write a convincing, or at least kind of convincing sounding essay. And it's going to get better and better at that, which is going to make us, way easier to do homework and cheat on homework, but it's going to make it way harder. Like, it's not going to get better at the things that I use it for, right? It's not going to get better at helping creatives, like, be creative without sort of like outsourcing the thinking. And what it makes me really worried about is that, because, like I talked about, there's the two camps, right? There's the camp of like, use AI for everything. And I remember literally, I saw this on like, I think it was like Twitter or something. Somebody who thought of themselves as either like an AI artist, AI writer, one of those. They justified themselves using AI in it because they said like, oh, well, I'm creativity impaired. Like I just don't have creativity. So like, that's why this tool is so good for me, because like I'm not creative. And it's like, well, you could be. Like, creativity isn't a thing that you have or you don't. Like, you can develop it and you can get better at it. Or you just don't be creative. Like, you just don't need to work in a creative field if you don't think that you're inherently creative, And also, like, who wants to buy your book if you're not creative? So, like, this whole argument is so mind-blowing to me, like, on that side. Because then the other side is people who are creative and have integrity and care. And then those people are like, never use it because it's going to replace us. And what I feel like is happening is because the people on this side, the people who are actually creative, that want to like make work that has like, that can stand up on its own, that doesn't fully use AI to create it, those people are not really contributing at all to the conversation or like to the development of these tools. And therefore these tools are being developed for the people on this side, right? The people that are like, I just want you to write this essay for me. I want you to think for me. I want you to do all the thinking for me because thinking is hard and I don't want to have to do it. And I think the thing that like really concerns me is if that's the route we're going down, if we're going down this path where AI is essentially a Google search engine, but also a place to sort of like process complicated feelings and emotions for us, that's not good. We have to learn how to do that. I mean, like I say all the time as an English teacher that my job is not to teach people how to write or to read. My job is to teach people how to think for themselves. Because like that's what reading a novel and analyzing it actually does, right? Is it helps you sort of like understand the world by seeing how other people or characters interact and how they deal with situations. If you don't learn that, if you don't learn how to like answer questions or how to make connections to your own life from other media, whether it's a fictional thing or even like a nonfiction thing, if you can't see how that relates to you in your life and you can't like make that connection, then it's going to be really hard to think for yourself outside of school. And that's what makes me so like unsettled by this idea that AI is going to be developed for that use case, for that scenario of like, I don't want to think, it's hard. And if that's what's happening, if that's sort of like what the engineers are doing, is building a tool to make it easier and easier and easier to not have to learn how to think for yourself, that's how you get to idiocracy, right? That's how you get to a place where people can't understand what the news is saying, so they just don't think about it. They just kind of like do the things they're told. They don't have to actually do anything to like challenge anybody or anything, because life is just kind of like moving through a series of stages, and that's all that it is. And that is like so, it's upsetting on so many levels, right? Because like, first of all, the level of like people aren't able to civically engage because they don't understand like anything happening in the government or in the world or in media. And then the other side of it is like, and you're not like enjoying life because, you know, as somebody who is wildly analytical and likes to think about things deeply, those are some of the greatest joys in my life, is whenever I kind of like can make a connection and understand something that maybe no one else connected before me. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It's irrelevant, because to me, like, it was a novel, fun experience that I would not have had I not had the skills to think for myself. Like, if I had not developed them before that. And to think about living in a world where no one will ever experience that, or it will be very increasingly more rare, right? Because they don't have the tools to make that like an optimum like opportunity. Like, that's like a sad world to live in, because people aren't going to be able to like think about things and understand things and like really find like connection in things that are different than them. And I know that this is like I'm sounding very apocalyptic. I'm sounding very much like this side, right? But I think that the answer is that like we have to start saying things. Like, we have to start saying like, hey, I want chats to have the context of that specific chat, because I know that it's probably going to be hard to optimize that or to give it enough memory to have that. But like, each chat needs to have its own like silo. Because that's how I can separate and easily consider like different projects. And like, if creatives aren't making these kinds of suggestions, aren't saying the things that would make our jobs as creatives easier without the AI doing the job that we do, if we don't start communicating that they're never going to be creating tools that actually make our jobs easier. They're going to make it easier to replace us. They're going to make it easier for us to never use AI, because it's not going to be doing the things we want it to do. So I think that like, I know this is going to be controversial. I know it is, but like, creatives need to start using AI in such a way that helps us use it as a tool to improve our individual creative processes. And it can't be a thing where we let it do the work for us. But like, we just need to accept that this is the world we're living in, because this tech is going to continue to be developed, is going to continue to grow, whether we like it or not. So I would much rather live in a world where like companies like OpenAI are creating tools that make it easier to brainstorm or easier to, organize your thoughts, as opposed to like giving you thoughts. I'd much rather live in a world where that's what they're developing, like tools that they can kind of like incorporate into things like Scrivener or whatever, as opposed to living in a world where it's like, because for the record, it does this already, right? So many times whenever I'm like brainstorming, it'll say things like, hey, do you want me to write a sample chapter for you of this thing you described? It's like, no, I want to write it. Like, I'm a writer. I like writing. I want to write it. What are you talking about? And like, that's going to be what it does. It's going to be like all it does. If we don't like start demanding like things that makes our life easier without like taking over our lives. And so, like, I know this is a rant. I know that this is sort of like a bit more of a ranty video than I typically do. I don't love it, but it was just a thing that I thought about. And I think that it's a thing that we have to start like thinking about and talking about more openly, because until we do, like, nothing's going to change, right? Until we do, AI is going to continue to be a thing where people outsource their thinking to a computer, and they don't consider the world beyond like their doorstep, and they don't have original thoughts, because why bother? Because I don't want to live in that world, and I hope that none of you do too. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed Ink Over AI, don't forget to like and subscribe. ring the bell, all those things. If you're listening to this on the podcast, feel free to leave a review or to or all those things. Give me some engagement and let's talk about this. Leave comments. Let's talk about this because like I said, if we talk about this, we might be able to slowly change things. So let's do that. Talk to you soon.